Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Noel Clarke, who is the creator and star of the series Bulletproof with their current special, South Africa. And you've always talked about the necessity to have a certain adaptability within the entertainment industry with all the different spaces that you end up in across film and television. And so how did that actually really help you in the process of creating the South Africa special, shooting in a different location, working with new crew prior to the crew that you'd been working with on the series up until this point?
Well, we have great co-producers with at Unstoppable, with Vertigo Entertainment as well. But I think, just being able to adapt and be across different countries and different crews is a minefield. It is difficult, but I think it's just, in today's world, the way TV is going and film, with the SVODs in particular, are really becoming global. I think it's something that we, a skill that we need to have and we need to learn. So in short, it's not easy at all, but I think it is becoming more and more of a necessity.
And part of the genesis of this special ending up being 3 episodes in South Africa was actually a little bit initially to do with Ashley's schedule with his other shows. But then within that, you also really thought about what would be a location that would really lend itself to the story that you wanted to tell about these characters. So within those conversations, how did it then land on South Africa specifically?
Well, because unfortunately, as we've seen in this country recently, unfortunately, these things where men abuse their spouses and sorry, spoilers, happen worldwide. And so we were looking at places where, at first we were looking at places where people don't look at it. So I think one of our first options was like Tokyo. We wanted to tell our story, but we wanted to be like, oh, because people don't automatically think that when you think about that country. And then we couldn't get to film there. And so South Africa came up, and it really wasn't about the place. It was about the story and highlighting these issues and wanting to kind of talk about them and tackle them. But at the same time, South Africa felt like a place where there was a lot more to say because of the culture, and its history, and not to look bad upon the country, because it's a beautiful country, but definitely, it has history and has issues. And I think, I didn't want to go there at first because of some of those issues. But I think, being able to help by bringing a production there to donate and fund and bring money to the area. And we did donate to townships and all that kind of stuff was important, and a lot of crew told us how inspiring it was to see 2 Black leads in a show in South Africa. But in terms of the issues within the show, I think it was important to show just what it's like for people out there in terms of the disparity between the haves and have-nots, and also the way that people treat their partners and spouses and whatnot.
And one of the things that the show does so fantastically all the time that, that kind of leads into the themes that you were just mentioning there is diving into these deeper issues, but at the same time, really bringing such a sense of levity and bringing the emotional heart of these 2 characters and their relationship with each other. Is that something where at this point you consciously think about the myriad of tones and how they're going to work in scenes? Or do you find that it just flows much more naturally at this point because you know these characters so well?
I think it's a little of both. It's a little of both because, like, Ashley and I know the characters well. So, a lot of that stuff, it's like we tell the writers, if we're not writing the episodes or whatever, because we can't write all of it, it's too much. But if we're not writing, we tell the writers, don't even bother trying to put that stuff in. Don't put pressure on yourself to try and find those beats. Like, that's what we do. Like, we'll do that. And so in that regard, it's organic. But in terms of the other half of what you said, you have to look at it very carefully, because levity is important, and undercutting dark moments with humor really can help an audience and can help people. But at the same time, you have to know when to not do it. You have to know when it's important not to do it and not try to make light of every situation, because some situations are not right to make light of. So it's about knowing when to do it and not to do it.
And within a lot of the scenes, particularly when you first started making the series together, the two of you would always kind of take the script as a foundation and then do certain elements of improvisation to really find a lot of those tones and those beats within a scene. But do you find that as you get further into the show and just, you know, the rapport that you and Ashley have becomes even closer in working together more, that that's something that you almost need to do a little bit less because you know each other's characters as well as you know your own at this point?
No, actually, we don't. Not less. I think if anything, if anything, it's the same amount. We really look at every scene and really think about what we can get out of it, and even on set, you know, we'll both come up with stuff, and you know, I come more from that sort of that realm, so I'll just throw stuff out, you know, and then you know, Ashley might laugh for a take, and then he's like, okay, and then he'll come back with something, and we build it from there, you know, or in between scenes when they're setting up, we'll talk about the scene and be like, oh, we could say this, we could say that. And so we definitely don't do it less. If anything, we do it the same, if not more, because I think now, you know, nobody expected it. You know, when we did the show, as I said, that stuff wasn't in the scripts. The show was what it was, really. And we really brought that stuff to the table. But of course, then the show came out and was a hit. So now it's expected. So now you kind of have to really look for it to make sure, because the show is action-packed and funny. So now the audience are expecting that, you know, so if anything, we do it more.
And how did you think about your character in terms of taking him into a completely different situation, into a different setting? And especially at the beginning of that first episode, taking him out of the workplace, taking him out of his home, and what type of person is he going to be on holiday with his friend?
Yeah. Well, I think it was definitely interesting, you know, about how they got there, and you know, it says a lot about my character that, you know, his best friend goes on holiday with his wife and kids, and my guy tags along because he doesn't have anyone, and he has this sort of on-off girlfriend now who calls him on the beach, but he doesn't, you know, he doesn't really get into the conversation, and I think it. You know, it was important to show that these guys were the only people he had, you know, and so therefore he's their sort of ride or die, as it were. Like he'll do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. And you know, any people watching the show, you realize when the incident happens and Pike's family character's kind of like, we need to do this. My character's like, cool, if you want to do it, let's do it. I don't have anything else to do. So he kind of is that guy that is just there, which I like. I don't mind a lot of the stories being around Pike, Ashley's character, and the family dynamic. You know, there's a lot of that, but I think it just works for the character. You always need one sort of loose cannon, and I think, you know, my character is that guy.
And within that idea that he's a little bit more of the loose cannon, I feel like what you've done with these two characters is create them as slight opposites to each other. But as the show goes on, they really start to take in characteristics from each other. So how at this point do you think about which aspect of Ashley's character that you want to pull into who Bishop is?
I think the Bishop, I think that the aspects that Bishop would want or like would be the family. You know, but that's the tragedy. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing of, like, if we do 10 seasons, that's the arc, isn't it? Is that he wants that family. He wants, you know, not to take it away from Pike, but he would love to have that. And, you know, that's the thing you constantly don't, in a show like this, you constantly don't give him, because he needs to be that guy that is the way he is. So I think as they take on more characteristics of the other characters, it's fun, but ultimately they're always going to look at things differently, because Bishop doesn't have anyone to worry about. He doesn't have anyone to take care of. And so that informs your key decisions when you're jumping off a building to save someone. Can I jump off this building? I got kids at home. Bishop's like, I don't give a, you know, I can jump off, you know, and does. And so you regardless of, as they get nearer to each other in sort of their other smaller aspects, that big fundamental thing, I think, is what keeps them different.
And within that as well, I think it's really interesting that as close as the two of them are, you know, for you with Bishop, it's like one of the things that he still struggles to open up about is his childhood and is his family history. And I was interested in why you wanted to make that specific choice, that, you know, he can sit there and tell his best friend that he loves him to his face, but he still always has something that is a little bit difficult for him to say out loud because of the experience for him.
I think it was important for us because men don't talk about things like that enough. Men don't confide in each other enough, and consequently they are angry or lash out. You know, a lot of the problems that are in society that men have are due to society and the way they've been brought up or not raised by fathers, you know. And so I think the beginning of that sort of stuff is to treating everybody better, you know, women, other men, is to talk. Is to be there for your family and talk to each other. And I think that's why we make those choices, you know. Bishop doesn't have any of that, but he's found someone that he can confide in, who arguably keeps him on the straight and narrow. Not that he would be a criminal, but I think there's an element of Bishop that could go Wolverine if Pike wasn't there to be his yin to his yang, you know. And I think that's important. And they hug and they say they love each other, and you don't get that a lot in shows. You don't get a lot in life with guys. So I think it's important.
Was that also a similar trajectory in the choice to, you know, we're seeing in the episodes like where Bishop's got the little anxiety clicker that he keeps playing with, and that's something that really helps to focus his mind. And I thought that, you know, it's a really interesting detail to pull into the series for him.
Yeah, 100%. It was, all of those things there are done with the intention of you're relating to people that need relating to. Those things didn't become like huge sellers because everyone was like, oh, look at this toy. People like need them. Some people need them. Some people sure just wanted to click around, but some people they help. I have a son, and my middle son, it definitely chills him out, you know, because he's always just moving. And, you know, when he has that in his hand, he can sit still, but you look at his hand and he's just fiddling and clicking, you know. And so these are things that are not talked about enough, you know, especially, you know, male to male. And so they were things that we just wanted to put in.
And when you're filming scenes in the show, because you're so involved in every single step of the way, you know, it's everything from the scripts to the editing to costume design choices to what props are going to look like, and casting other characters within the series as well. How does that actually really help you then when you step into scenes? Because at that point, I imagine that this character is just part of the fabric, and you already have such a sense of where a scene could potentially go because you've already been considering so many of those choices and options.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, I think that the key for that is to make sure you don't disrespect the other actors, and, you know, because they've come onto a job and they know it's your job and your show. So we tell everyone just to be free, and that we might change the lines and whatnot. And I think people get that, but 100%, like, a lot of the choices are our choices, and, you know, we just want the show to be the best it can be. So, you know, we try to facilitate that in every choice we make. And, you know, even the humor, as I said, is considered, you know, in terms of what we're doing. We're just trying to make it entertaining, which is what it has been so far for the audience.
Yeah. And do you find as well that your own work and your own experience as a director influences the way that you work as an actor when someone else is directing you, and the way that you're thinking about a lot of the scene work and details like camera placement and where the setup's going to be?
No, I try to leave the directors alone. I don't want any director to come on our job with that pressure. Like, can you imagine coming onto our job with the pressure of knowing that one of the actors, now both, because Ashley directs now as well, did his short, right? That both of the lead actors are directors as well. Like, you would never want to come on the job. So I think we make it very clear that we don't do that. If we're acting, we're acting. If it looks like it's going left or looks like it's going awry, then sure, you know, there's advice, there's, you know, have you thought about doing this or doing that? But we try not to do that at all, because I think it's already a lot of pressure for someone coming on board the job. You know, imagine if they had to think that their actors were over their shoulder saying, I don't think you should put the camera there, bro, like, or ma'am, like, you shouldn't do that. I don't think that they would. I think it would be too much pressure. So we just stay out of it.
I think that sounds like a good deal for all of the directors. And one of the details that you really kind of have a lot of playfulness with in the special is the costume design elements. And you've always used that as a way to really kind of prescribe these characters and explore certain aspects of their personality and their characteristic traits. And then within this setting, there's a whole other layer of like, you know, going back again to like, what are they wearing on vacation? What did they pack in their suitcase? So that even when they're on a case, they're still technically in those clothes that they packed for a vacation. So how did you work with the costume design team on really finding what those details, particularly for your character?
Well, Lauren Miller was a costume designer, and she did exactly what you said. She was like, what would these guys wear on holiday? You know, and then try to, you know, think of the colors that Bishop would wear. And, you know, it's really hot, but sometimes when it's hot, he still wears the jacket. So there's a moment where it's boiling hot and I still have a red tracksuit on, like sweatsuit thing on. And it's just like everyone else is boiling hot and Bishop's like, I'm fine. Like, what's wrong with you guys? Do you know what I mean? So it was really about her really thinking about the character and pulling in the trainers or sneakers, as you guys call them, to kind of suit what Bishop would wear on summer holiday or on his vacation. So that was all very interesting and lovely. And I think she did a great job, to be fair.
And you even get the chance to pull his trainers into one of the storylines within the show and kind of like show the emotional connection and the loss that he feels when a kid essentially barters him into giving his shoes up.
Yeah.
And how do you think about a lot of details like that you really want to continue revisiting throughout the series, and then where you start to think about new character details and new aspects like that to add in?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's just something we do. Like, so the trainer thing started in season 1 for those people that haven't seen it, the sneaker thing. And it was never in there. It was just something that I added in when we did our first chase and beat the bad guy, and I kicked him, and then I was like, you owe me a new pair of trainers. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I like that. I'm going to start doing that. And then I just started doing it. And then it became a thing. Now, the amount of tweets and messages I get and say, oh, Bishop's trainers, and oh my gosh, I hope Bishop doesn't lose another pair of trainers. Like, the audience really get into it. But I think those are things that make the show special. Those character details that Joe Public can relate to. Like, everybody at some point has had a new pair of sneakers that they don't want to get dirty, right? And so therefore, no matter who you are, or shoes, so no matter who you are, you can relate to that, you know. And I think those are the things that really make the show stand out in a way that hasn't been seen in the UK before, and is helping it do well in America, because it's like, who can't relate to that, having those new, the first time those new sneakers or shoes, someone steps on them, or, you know, someone drops a drink and it splashes across the floor and you think, oh, it missed me, and then there's a big streak of milkshake across your shoe and you're like, what the, like, people can relate to that. So yeah.
And in filming a lot of the stunt sequences for the special, that was a slightly different journey and process than what you've done in the UK, because it was slightly different. It sounds like legislation on what you were allowed to actually step in and do yourselves in South Africa and shooting a lot of those scenes. And also there was a lot more of actual stunt work in places where you might have had CGI and visual effects before. So how did that really shift and evolve the way that you were working on those types of scenes?
It was interesting because we try and do as many stunts as we can in the UK that we're allowed to do. You know, we have a great stunt team over here, but what we're allowed to do, we try and do as much as we can. But I think South Africa, definitely the stunts were bigger because there's more space. So the stunts were bigger. They were a bit more action heavy. I think the real difference, as you said, was that, you know, a lot of the shootouts in the UK, just because of security and the nature of the country, you know, a lot of the shootouts are more very quiet firearms, and then you know, they add the noise in after. In South Africa, they were like, nah, don't worry about that, you know, we'll just put what we put in. And also they have the squibs, so, you know, they'll set up the squibs there, so when the things hit, real stuff will go and start popping off. And it was it was interesting. But what it does, it makes your reaction so much more real. You know, so when I'm standing by the window and the glass pops, where usually that would be like a visual effect, or they would do a plate shot, do the glass, and then I would come in. This time I'm there, like bang, and it goes off, and I'm like, woo, and I'm there, and it just makes it just gives you more adrenaline in those moments and stuff. So it was, I think, helpful. It was, I think, helpful, and I think the audience can tell, and the audience like that you're really there, and it's not like I lift my fist and then suddenly there's like a guy 40 pounds heavier than me with an afro being my stuntman doing the thing. You know, they want to know that I'm doing it. So I think they like that.
And part of why those scenes work so well in the show is because you always ground it back to these two characters. You know, there's moments where they'll just share a look at each other and they're communicating so much in the middle of a massive shootout that's going on around them. And so I wanted to ask about the way in which you always manage to successfully do that and the consciousness behind that when you're shooting those types of scenes together.
The consciousness is always there because it's about the camaraderie. It's about the show more than anything is about the brotherhood between these two guys. And so, you know, you're always going to get a look between them, or in the middle of a shootout, one of them say something, you know, I didn't know you were wearing those jeans. Are they the jeans I bought you for Christmas? Like, we're in a shootout. Yeah, but, you know, because you have that, you kind of have people have that relationship with their friends, you know, that's real life. You know, you could spend a whole evening with a friend and then be walking home and then be like, did I buy you those shoes? And yeah. So we kind of make that part of the show because that's the real life that people have with their friends, and that's what makes it relatable, you know. And I think other shows, I think this is where other shows won't do that, because people will be like, we don't need that dialogue. You know, I've been on other shows like that, and I've been, you know, an exec and whatever, and it's like, we don't need that dialogue. Why would you need that dialogue? Why would he talk about his friend's jeans in the middle of a shootout? So usually that stuff gets cut out immediately because, like, you don't need it, doesn't move the story forward, it's irrelevant, boom, gone. In our show, I'm like, well, it doesn't move the story forward, but it is relevant because that's what people do. It's real. And so we just do it. I think that's the best thing I can say. We just do it because things like that happen. But I think it's funny. Even when it's not meant to be funny. I mean, it's meant to be funny, but it's not ha funny. It's observational humor that happens in real life. You know, you're in the middle of talking to someone, you're like, hey, why is that pigeon over there on the thing? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just happens. And so we just make sure we put things like that in the show.
There's also such a myriad of different strands of emotional experiences that you push into your character after scenes like that. You know, if you look at that first shootout at the beginning of episode 1, where he's almost on a bit of a high, it's like, yeah, like we did that, we survived that, and he's almost excited by it. And then there's other times where it has a completely different impact and it's a bit more serious after those scenes. And so how do you think about each of those stunt scenes and then the emotional response and how he's going to be feeling and processing that moment in the immediate aftermath of it?
Yeah, I mean, well, the stunt scenes, you just think about them as per, you know, what's in there and do them. And I think the emotional process is guided by whatever we've decided in the scripts. You know, is it a time to be, something's going to happen? Okay, you open the car boot and there's a guy tied up in there with a ball in his mouth. Then you can say something funny. You open a car boot and there's a young man or young woman in there who's dead. Not time to be funny. And so you just have to make sure, even in the scripts, we pick those moments where we know you can lighten the mood and where you know this is important because it's about real issues and about real things. And so they give each other a look, but there's no laughs. And I think that, again, is a balance that we found early on. I think that's a balance that's important, because it's not, you know, it's not a comedy. You know, some people go, oh, I love it, it's so funny. It's a comedy. It's like, it's not a comedy. It's a drama. It's an action drama that happens to be funny because of the way the characters are. And so I think just knowing the difference between when we can make light of something or when we can't is important. And that's what we try to do.
Mm-hmm. And when you're doing a lot of the action scenes, you have additional cameras that are on set for that. But I've heard that even the day-to-day scenes that you tend to shoot with 2 cameras. And so I was really interested in what the decision behind always having 2 cameras and getting that extra coverage in the initial moment on every scene was.
I think schedule. I mean, the schedule wise, you kind of have to make sure you get your coverage. So I think that's an option. That's one of the reasons. But we also, I just think being able to move faster and get dynamic footage and make sure you're getting everything you need. I think shooting 2 cameras. Sometimes we have 3. Sometimes we have 3, depending on what we're doing. I just think it makes it a lot easier, and it makes the schedule doable. Whereas if you're shooting single camera, you're not getting through the time you need to get through the time to make those episodes.
And when you look back to those first conversations that you and Ashley had when you were conceptualizing this and sitting in a coffee shop on Tottenham Court Road, how similar is the show at this point to that initial document that the 2 of you put together in terms of the details?
I mean, for me, it's always going to be the same, because it's very different, because it's just, that was the concept. That was the outline. That was everything from, right, one of us is going to be crazy. The other one's not going to be crazy. One of us is going to be married and have these kids. The other one's not, they're going to be loyal to each other, best friends, and all the stuff that we wanted in the show is there. So I could say it's 100% accurate. But of course, we didn't know what storylines we were going to do. So there's loads of elements that have changed. But essentially from our brief, from our document, it was like a 6-page Bible of this is what we want to do. Like, I would say it's like 99% what we wanted to do.
Yeah. And Ashley talks a lot about how much he had the opportunity to learn from working with you, particularly in that early part of the process, because you were coming into it with experience already as a writer, as a producer, as a director, and how that's been really influential in him having a lot of autonomy over his career. But in turn, what are the things along the way that you feel you've had the opportunity to learn from working alongside him on this show?
Just, I think for me, I've always admired Ashley's stillness. His the way he performs is very, very, and he does it a lot on his other show, which I watch. He's very small, he's very subtle, and I've always admired that. I've always liked that, and I think for me, I've taken a lot of that as well, or in terms of just when Bishop needs to be like that. Bishop is the opposite. Bishop is animated and wide, and I think people don't always understand the difficulty of doing that role, because they think, oh, that guy's just playing themselves, or they're a buffoon, which I'm definitely not either. But it's knowing when to be light and knowing when to be dark, making the audience laugh at the right moment, the timing, But in terms of when Bishop needs to be still, like, taking a lot of that from how Ashley performs in a lot of his things, and it's really, really powerful, I think. And then on an outside of work type thing, I think just sometimes Ashley sits back and watches things, and I think maybe there's more of that I've taken on board, because I don't, if I got something to say, I'm just going to say it. And I think he's learned more, as he said, learned to take more autonomy by becoming more like me. But, I think I've learned some of that where, okay, I'm going to sit back and let you dig yourself into the hole before I speak. Whereas if I can see the person digging, I'm like, listen, let me stop you there. Whereas Ashley's like, I'm going to let them finish. And then, so I think, we've taken characteristics and learned things from each other, which is helpful.
Yeah. Well, what you've created in this show together is really special, and congratulations on the South Africa episodes. And thank you so much, Noel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.